And unfortunately, we are starting with a really difficult one, and one that I hope the rest of Canada is having. And that is about the tragic discovery of 751 unmarked graves on the grounds of a former residential school in Saskatchewan's Cowessess First Nation. Now, many of these graves are believed to be children who attended the school. The big question a lot of people are asking now is, what needs to happen now?
Well, the Native Women's Association of Canada says that they believe that criminal charges should be laid, and I completely agree. So far, fewer than 50 individuals have been convicted for crimes related to the schools. And I just can't help but think, like, there are definitely priests and nuns and leaders still alive today who know what happened, who are guilty for what happened, and they need to be criminally investigated and held accountable for those crimes. Some out there might think like, well, they were, just doing what they were told to do by some higher power. And I can't help but think about, Nazi Germany and the fact that while Hitler may have been the mastermind, there were Nazi officers and soldiers who conducted out his wishes, and they needed to be held accountable. Each one of those priests and nuns who chose to work there, who did some of the heinous acts that we know have happened, they had a choice. At any given point in time, any one of them could have left, could have been a whistleblower. And I'm not aware of any of stories that go along those lines. I just think that in order to heal, a first step is accountability. And I think criminal charges, it is so dark and awful.
It's because there's on paper only 8 children who have been listed as dying at that Maryvale school. 8. Mm-hmm. There are 751 unmarked graves. So each one of those bodies, we don't know the combination of which ones are children precisely. There are adults who are known to have been buried there. But when you just take a look at the sheer discrepancy in the numbers, that is a 600-person discrepancy. So my question then is, it's like a car accident, right? If someone hits your car, you get hurt, your car gets damaged, you have mental anguish, and then that person then says, I know I did that, but it's up to you to pay for all of your own repairs, and pay for all of your own therapy as well. That's what it sounds like is happening here, because there have been so many First Nations and communities who have been fundraising their own forensic investigations. Mm-hmm. Every single level of government needs to be coming up to the table, and don't just throw some seemingly large arbitrary number of like 10 million or 5 million. It is very expensive work to do, but there are 150 sites across Canada that I think need to be thoroughly investigated, all paid for by the government, and every single person who is still alive that is connected to any of these deaths needs to be prosecuted. And I hear through the grapevine that the Catholic Church, all the way up to the Vatican, might have some money that potentially they might want to throw in here. So I'm calling on every single level of government to pitch in the money and to also have those prosecuted who have literally blood on their hands.
Well, we have a message from Kim on Facebook, Melissa, and Kim writes to us saying the churches and government must release the school's attendance records and documents in order for these children to be identified and have the proper ceremonial burial they deserve. They also need to pay for the recovery of all the bodies and the cost of identifying them. So that's what you were saying, Melissa. And then Kim adds, all this paperwork, right? There has been also some difficulty of getting the documentation, just who was enrolled at these facilities and what that record is, so they can start doing the research, so they can start tracing the names and identifying these descendants from these First Nations, from these Indigenous communities. So thank you, Kim, for that comment.
Yeah, can I just hop on that for 1 second?
Yeah.
Just at least 3,200 children died in these schools. Nearly a third of those deaths, the name of the child wasn't recorded, and nearly half didn't list the cause of death. That fact, I'm just going to let that sit there for a minute.
No, I think it's
really
so important.
It's about
It's important what you're saying, Cynthia, because who wants to go nameless? This is, it's a layer upon layer of tragedy here.
And there's no humanity in how they were treated. It really is. It's heartbreaking. I look at it as a mom. I have a 4 and a 6-year-old. And I think to myself, I monitor every moment of their day. I know where they are. And, heaven forbid if I didn't, I would turn the world upside down. And these parents were not given that option. And, the longing and the sadness that they feel, I get emotional thinking about it, but also I think about the fear that the children must have felt. It's just heartbreaking. But it also brings me to, I know we're talking about, how do we move forward here? Yes, criminal charges. Yes, compensation. Education. Education is key. And I'm talking about real education. Change curriculums in schools. Start this conversation young. And, also open your eyes. Speak up when you see this injustice. When people start talking about stereotypes, shut them down. There's a friendship center, the Mi'kmaq Friendship Center here in Halifax, and it's run by an amazing woman named Pam Glode DeRoche. And we had her on our program a few weeks ago when the bodies were found in Kamloops. And she said something that really, really struck me. Of the 45 programs that they run, all of them can be traced back to residential schools, whether it's, dealing with substance abuse, food insecurity, mental health issues, whatever the case, they can all be traced back. The root problem is residential schools. What does that tell you? We need to change. That's what it tells me.
I appreciate what you're saying there about stereotypes too, Maria, because Cynthia, you and I were in an interview yesterday. We did an interview together. It was, we interviewed a lovely, compassionate, empathetic person. And at the end, we had a great discussion. And at the end of the interview, she thanked us for our questions. And she was like, I love talking to Canadians. You all are so kind. And this was about an hour after the news came out. And our whole team, there were 4 of us on the Zoom call, we sat with that and we didn't know how to accept that compliment, that stereotype, that reputation that Canadians have for being nice and kind. And my first reaction was like, oh, you might want to revisit that perspective. Not that I didn't want to, accept the fact that she had a good time, but the thing is that what is Canada really? As we approach a holiday in Canada next week, as we approach our quote unquote nation's birthday, I think about what Bobby Cameron said yesterday. Bobby Cameron, in response to the finding, was talking about how Canada should be seen. And what he said was, we are seeing the results of genocide, the genocide Canada committed. Canada will be known as a nation who tried to exterminate their First Nations. That sentence really resonated with me. Canada will be known as a nation who tried to exterminate their First Nations. And so next week, I feel really gross about waving around a flag and, pumping the chest, being like, Maple Leaf forever, and what that stands for. And I really hope that a lot of people are rethinking what it means to be Canadian and who we are and what that is, like, for real.
And
you
if
know
you
what,
hear...
though? Go ahead, Sin.
Well, I was just going to say, there are still going to be people out there who will try to, be like, oh, well, maybe they died from disease or maybe this. And I think, to your point, Maria, if you hear people talking about that, I think you need to correct. This is the time for listening. This is the time for believing. This is the time for acknowledging and taking a hard look at the truths that are there. So, just shut that kind of conversation down if you hear it.
But I also do think there's a time for listening and there is a time for action. And we've had so many amazing, powerful voices from the Indigenous community here on our show. And it is also about realizing, and I'm echoing something I think Kennedy Palmater said on our show earlier this week, that the government is us and we are the government because we put them there. And so they need to work on the will of the people. And so I have been writing my MP nonstop because that person represents me. And if the community doesn't come up in a critical mass and put pressure on their elected official, then you could sit here and talk all day. This is what we should do. My elected official is there because I put him there. We have to remember that we have to push to have what our will is represented at the federal level. So tell your MP, your territorial representative, what you want to see happen. Otherwise, nothing is going to change. We've been having such a difficult discussion here, and I know this may be triggering and very difficult for many people who are watching. So we do want to say this, that if you are a residential school survivor, if you are in distress, if you've been affected by the residential school system and you need help, contact the Indian Residential School Survivors Society. It is toll-free. It is 24 hours. Indian Residential Schools Crisis Line. The information is on the screen. Please take care. We're going to take a break and be right back.